Hello everyone, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thorgy, your guide to all things geeky, and welcome to another comic class, Indy Spotlight. Yes, this is the show that I do once a month here on Comic Class, where I just spotlight an indie book that I think everyone should know about. And today's book, yeah, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know if I should do this series for Indy Spotlight, because A, it's by IDW, and while IDW is technically an independent company out there, they're still kind of a big name. Most people still know that IDW exists, so I don't really need to make a whole episode talking about the different books that they put out. And also, even if I was going to talk about an indie book from IDW, I probably wouldn't pick one that is based on a pre-existing franchise, because again, that pre-existing franchise comes with a name brand, and the Indie Spotlight is more to advertise books that you probably wouldn't hear about, and if it comes with a pre-existing brand name, you've probably already heard about it. So I had no intention of talking about this book, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized, darn it, this book was just too much fun. I have to stop and talk about just what made this book so damn good. And also, as I said, the Indie Spotlight is here to try and tell you guys to pick up a book that you probably never pick up on your own. And yeah, I honestly don't think anybody out there was really that excited for the idea of a Clue series. There are a lot of franchises that IDW picks up and decides to make comics about, and a lot of those franchises are ones that people are asking for. They are begging to come back. I don't think anybody out there looked at the board game Clue and said, yeah, I want to read a comic book about that. But hey, I decided to pick it up. I decided to check it out. And you know what? I now want a comic about Clue. So yes, even though this is a larger indie book, I am still going to go ahead and spotlight it today, because I just have to come in here and tell everyone how much fun the Clue book is. But yes, for anybody out there who does not know the board game or the movie that was based on the board game, although it would kind of be weird for you to know the movie and not the board game, but in case you are unaware of this franchise, Clue is a board game where you play as one of several guests attending a rich fancy dinner party when suddenly your host, Mr. Body, winds up dead. Now you and the other players have to figure out which one of you killed him in which room with what item. Sounds rather morbid for a children's game, but I assure you it's rather fun if you've never played. So as you can imagine, this comic is basically that exact concept except turned into a story. However, they do make certain changes. For example, Miss Scarlet, Mr. Green, Professor Plum, Colonel Mustard, and Mrs. Peacock all remain the same. However, the character of Mrs. White, who was a housekeeper in the board game, has been changed to Senator White. They have also added 3 new characters, Dr. Orchid, Detective Okra, and Detective Amarillo, as well as the best character in the whole book, Upton the Butler. Why is Upton the best character in this whole book? Because Upton is omniscient. He actually stops and addresses the audience as they're reading the book and actually comments on everything that's happening, and I love that because, yeah, it's a Clue comic. We know all these people are being brought here, and Mr. Body is going to die, and one of them did it in a certain room with a certain item. We know how all this works out. We're not stupid, so we're not really willing to sit there and go along with this story, because we all know where it's going to lead. So having a person in this comic actually stop, turn to us and say, yeah, you all know what's happening here. You know he's going to die. You know that's what this is about. It actually makes this book engaging again. It actually makes me willing to overlook that and be willing to go along with it. In fact, he will even just snap his fingers and skip the story ahead by hours in order to get us to the actual moment when things go down. Because he realizes, you know it's going to happen, why drag it out? But just making him willing to break the fourth wall wouldn't be enough to get the reader to go along with him. He's also incredibly clever and witty. He is a delight to read. In fact, everything in this book is rather clever and witty. There are little descriptions that pop up for every single one of the characters, and you figure they would give you really important information, and they give you enough to know who they are, but they're also just kind of there to make fun of these characters, and yeah, it's legitimately funny. For example, when Mr. Body finally shows up, his little description just reads, Host, Cypher, enjoys leaving weapons in random rooms. If you know this game and you know what is going to happen, that is the perfect thing to point out about Mr. Body. Or Colonel Mustard, his description, war hero, Buddhist knows exactly how to kill everyone in this room. In a book where you know someone is going to kill someone else in this room, that is actually a very clever thing to just come flat out and say, yeah, he could totally do that. But as I said, this book adds several new characters to this game, but it also makes some significant changes to some of the remaining characters, and I love that because it actually updates them so much. For example, Mr. Green has now been changed to be an exact replica of a real-world pharmaceuticals mogul, and they bring up in this book several problems that people have with the real-life version of him, and they talk about in this book. I love that because it makes this whole book seem new. It seems relevant again. It doesn't feel like I'm playing a game that's probably been around for 100 years. I actually don't know how long the Clue game has been around, but it feels like 100 years. I played it when I was a kid, and I'm incredibly old. And you probably think that when Mr. Body dies, that's going to be the end of issue 1. That's the big cliffhanger to end on. No, as I said, this book realizes you know that's going to happen, so how would that be a cliffhanger? So instead, it happens in the middle of the book, and there's another cliffhanger at the end of this book that I did not see coming at all. And speaking of providing things that I didn't see coming, there are 3 different covers for this book. And that's actually important because every single cover has a different clue on the last page of each issue. Every single one of these different versions of the book has a final page that shows what different characters were doing at a specific time in this story, and each of them uncover a different clue. That is freaking genius. Don't get me wrong, it is probably a marketing strategy to get people to buy more copies of this book, but it's also a brilliant way of turning this comic into an actual game, which is what this is based upon. So yeah, I never thought I would ever be saying it, but the Clue comic is really freaking good. I had a blast reading this issue. It just came out last week, so you can probably still go to your local comic book store and find it right there. You could also find it on Comixology, but as I said, the fact that the last page of every single issue has a different clue in it actually makes me really want to recommend that you go to your store and actually pick up a physical copy. This was a great surprise, so I hope that you guys enjoy it as well. And I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Indie Spotlight as well. If you guys did enjoy it, we do these every single month, but every single Wednesday, we just have our regular comic class where we just talk about everything from the world of comic books. And then on the weekends, we do several other shows such as movie reviews and game reviews and just anything else about the world of geekery. So if you guys want to see any of that, make sure you click that subscribe button. And also, you can follow me on Twitter, Twitch, and Tumblr at Professor Thorgy. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Come back next time.